Story 1. I've driven Route 421 through the North Carolina mountains more times than I can count. Night shifts, deadlines, family emergencies, that road knew me. I knew every curve, every dip, every mile marker. I thought I did, anyway. It was a Tuesday in late October. I was heading north out of Boone after dropping off some equipment at a job site. No traffic. No moon. Just my headlights cutting through that thick Appalachian dark, the kind of dark that feels alive, like it's pressing against your windows. About 12 miles past Deep Gap, I saw him. A man standing on the shoulder. Not walking. Not hitchhiking. Just standing, facing the road, both arms raised above his head. Waving. Like he was greeting someone. I slowed down instinctively. My eyes went to his face. He was smiling. Wide. Too wide for the situation. Too wide for 2 a.m. on an empty highway. I kept moving. Told myself he was drunk, lost, something normal. By the time I hit the next curve, I'd already started convincing myself I hadn't really seen what I saw. Then my headlights swept over the road ahead. He was there again. Same man. Same posture. Arms raised. Smiling. Standing on the shoulder about 300 yards ahead of me. I hit the brakes. Hard. The car skidded slightly on the wet asphalt. I sat there, engine running, staring at him. He hadn't moved. Just stood there, arms up, that smile plastered across his face, looking directly at my windshield. I checked my mirrors. Nothing behind me. Checked the road ahead. He was still there. I told myself it wasn't the same man. Couldn't be. I'd been moving at 60 miles an hour. There was no way anyone had gotten ahead of me on foot. There were no other cars. No side roads between where I'd first seen him and where I was now. I checked the map later. I checked it a dozen times. There were no side roads. I pulled a U-turn. My hands were shaking bad enough that I nearly went into the ditch. I drove south for about 2 miles before I pulled into a gravel lot beside a dark auto shop and just sat there with the engine running for almost 20 minutes. I called my wife. She didn't answer. I called again. Still nothing. When I finally started driving again, I took the long way home. 50 extra miles through Wilkesboro. I didn't care. I needed lights. Towns. Other cars. But here's the part that stayed with me. The part one didn't tell my wife for 3 weeks. When I pulled into our driveway that night, I sat in the car for a moment before going inside. Just exhausted, trying to decompress. I looked up at the house. Our porch light was on. We never leave the porch light on. And standing in the shadow beside the front steps, almost invisible against the dark siding of the house, there was a shape. Just standing there. Arms at its sides this time. I blinked. Looked again. Nothing. Just the bushes. Just the dark. I don't know what I saw that night on Route 421. I don't know what I almost saw in my own driveway. But I stopped driving at night through those mountains after that. My wife thinks it's because of the deer. I let her think that. It's easier than the truth. Story 2. My buddy Carlos and I were doing a weekend drive through the Smokies. No real plan. Just 2 guys who needed to get out of Charlotte for a few days. We took US 19 south out of Maggie Valley, heading toward Bryson City. The road winds through the mountains tight and narrow, and at night the forest comes right up to the shoulder. You feel enclosed. Tunneled in. Like the trees are leaning over the road, listening. We were low on gas, so when we spotted a little station, 2 pumps, a cinder block building, 1 buzzing fluorescent light out front, we pulled in. An older man behind the window watched us pull up. Didn't wave. Didn't move. Just watched. His face was hard to read. Not unfriendly exactly. More like someone watching something they've already seen before and aren't surprised by. The pump was slow. Painfully slow. We joked about it at first. Carlos went inside to grab drinks while I stood there listening to the tick of the pump counter and the sound of the creek somewhere down the embankment in the dark. He came back out looking a little off. "That guy in there," he said, getting back in the car and handing me a bottle of water. He was just staring at me the whole time. Didn't say a word. I put $2 on the counter and he just looked at it. Didn't take it. Didn't say anything. Just looked at it and then looked back at me. I told him mountain towns had weird people. He didn't laugh. He put his seatbelt on and stared straight ahead through the windshield while I finished pumping. I noticed he hadn't opened his drink. We got back on US 19, heading south. Maybe 10 minutes of driving. The road curved through a gap in the ridgeline and then straightened out along a creek. Spanish moss hanging low from the trees on the left. A guardrail catching our lights on the right. And there, unmistakably, undeniably, was the gas station. Same 2 pumps. Same cinder block building. Same single buzzing fluorescent light. Same old man behind the window. Watching the road. Carlos grabbed my arm. Hard. Stop. I didn't stop. I accelerated instead. I don't know why. It wasn't a decision, exactly. Some instinct that lives below thought just said keep moving. Don't look. Don't stop. Don't let whatever this is get a second look at you. We both stared straight ahead and I pushed the car to 50, then 60 on that winding mountain road, which was reckless, and I didn't care. Neither of us spoke for a long time. The silence between us had a different texture than before. Something heavier in it. Finally Carlos said, "That was the same place." I said I knew. We didn't turn around. I said I knew that too. He was quiet again. Then, there wasn't a sign outside the first time. Did you notice? No name. No brand. Just the lights. I hadn't noticed that. I thought about it. He was right. No Exxon, no Shell, no hand-painted name on the cinder block. Just a building and pumps and a man who watched people arrive without apparently caring whether they stayed or left. We checked the map when we got to Bryson City. There was only one gas station on that stretch of US 19. We had driven in one direction the entire time. We had not turned around. We had not looped back. The road did not circle. There was a single straight run between the 2 sidings with no intersecting routes, no U-shaped bends, no logging roads or fire lanes that could have brought us back to the same point. Carlos doesn't talk about it. He says he's convinced there's a logical explanation and he just doesn't want to know what it is. I respect that. I've spent over a year trying to find that explanation myself. I haven't found one. And I've stopped looking, because every time I get close to an answer that almost makes sense, I remember the man's face through that window. The same expression both times. Not confused to see us again. Not surprised. Not anything. Just watching. Like he'd been expecting us to come back around. Story 3. I do long drives alone. Always have. Something about an empty road at night clears my head in a way that nothing else does. So when I had a bad week at work last November, I got in my car on a Friday night and drove up to Skyline Drive in Virginia's Shenandoah. Gates close at dusk for most of the year, but I'd timed it for a stretch when they leave a section accessible overnight. There's nothing quite like Skyline Drive in the dead of night. Pitch black except for your headlights. Trees on both sides, so close you feel like you're inside something. No cell service. No radio signal. Just the sound of your engine and the wind moving through the ridge. I was about 15 miles in, somewhere near the El Cualo area, when my headlights caught a figure on the side of the road. A woman. Sitting cross-legged on the shoulder, in the gravel, about 2 feet from the tree line. She was looking down. Her lips were moving. I slowed down and rolled my window down. Asked if she was okay. She looked up. She was maybe 35. No coat. She was wearing a light summer dress in 30-degree weather. Her expression was blank. Not scared. Not relieved to see me. Just blank. She looked back down. Kept moving her lips. "Ma'am, are you hurt? Do you need help?" She held up one finger. Like she was asking me to wait a moment. Like she was in the middle of something and didn't want to be interrupted. I sat there for almost a minute. My car's heater was running. I could see my breath through the open window. She was sitting on frozen gravel in a thin dress and she was not shivering. I asked again. She didn't respond. Just kept moving her lips, eyes down. Something about it made my skin crawl in a way that plain fear doesn't. It wasn't that she seemed dangerous. It wasn't that she seemed insane, exactly. It was that she seemed completely occupied. Completely absorbed in whatever she was doing. As if I was an insignificant interruption in something much larger. I called 911. No signal. I kept driving, intending to get to a point with service and call it in. But maybe 2 miles up the road, something made me look in my rearview mirror. She was standing in the road behind me. In the very center of the lane, arms at her sides, watching my taillights. She had not been running. There had been no sound of footsteps, no movement when I'd checked the mirror 10 seconds before. She was simply there, where there had been nothing. I got off Skyline Drive at the next exit and drove down the mountain into Front Royal. I called the park rangers from a gas station. Gave them the location. Described the woman. The ranger on the phone paused for a moment and then asked me to confirm the location. I did. He said they'd send someone to check. His tone was careful. Measured. The tone of someone not saying everything they know. I asked if there had been reports in that area before. He said he couldn't share that information. I've looked for news reports. Missing persons, unusual incidents on Skyline Drive that fall. I found nothing. That doesn't make me feel better. It makes me feel worse. Story 4. I'm a night owl and a long-distance driver. When my sister got sick 2 winters ago, I made the 12-hour drive from Georgia to Pennsylvania more times than I can remember. I-81 through Virginia is the backbone of it, straight through the Appalachian Valley, ridgelines on both sides, mile after mile of darkness and the occasional cluster of truck stop lights. On my 3rd trip, somewhere north of Roanoke, I pulled into a rest area. Needed coffee from a thermos, needed to stretch, needed to give my eyes a break from the monotony. The rest area was empty except for one semi parked at the far end, lights off, engine idling. I parked near the vending machines, poured my coffee, and sat for a few minutes. Then I noticed the truck's passenger mirror. Someone was sitting in the cab. And they were watching me through the mirror. I could see the silhouette, head turned at an angle, face toward the mirror, body completely still. Just watching. I told myself truckers sleep in their cabs all the time. Maybe they'd heard me pull in. Maybe they were checking out the lot. I finished my coffee. Stretched a little. Got back in my car. As I pulled out of the space, I glanced at the truck again. The silhouette in the mirror was still there. Still turned toward me. I drove back onto 81. About 2 miles north, a semi passed me in the left lane going fast. Moving. Pushing. I caught the number on the plate out of habit, I always do. It was the same truck. I was almost certain. It passed me and settled into the right lane about a 1/4 mile ahead. I told myself I was paranoid. Lots of trucks. Plates are hard to read at night. But then it slowed down. Until we were exactly side by side. I looked up at the cab. The driver's window was down. He was looking directly at me. Not a passing glance. Not idle curiosity. Staring. Both hands on the wheel, face turned fully toward my car, eyes locked on mine for what felt like 30 seconds at highway speed. I braked hard. Let him pull ahead. He didn't accelerate. He matched my new speed. I braked again. Got off at the next exit, a dark little ramp leading to a closed diner and a county road with no lights. I sat there for 15 minutes. When I got back on 81, I drove the next 100 miles in the middle lane at 80 miles an hour, checking my mirrors every 30 seconds until the sun started to come up over the Blue Ridge. I never saw the truck again. But for the rest of the drive, every time a semi came up behind me, my chest went tight. I still feel it now, sometimes. On any interstate at night. That particular kind of exposed feeling you get when you realize someone has been watching you from a distance for longer than you knew. I've told myself a dozen versions of a rational explanation. Coincidence of similar trucks. A driver who was bored, or unstable, or just strange in that particular way that long-haul isolation sometimes produces. Fatigue making me perceive patterns that weren't there. I can get about halfway through any of those explanations before I hit the wall. The wall is this, that expression on his face. That complete stillness. Both hands on the wheel, face turned fully toward my car, eyes that didn't blink or waver for the entire 30 seconds I could see them. Not the look of someone who found a passing car mildly interesting. The look of someone who had been waiting for that specific car to come along. Story 5. I want to be clear before I start this one. I'm not someone who believes in anything. No superstition. No religion. No sixth sense. I'm an engineer. I believe in what I can measure. I say that so you understand how much it cost me to find no rational explanation for what happened on US 250. I was driving from Staunton west into Highland County, Virginia. Highland is one of the most remote counties on the East Coast. Almost no cell service. Fewer people per square mile than almost anywhere else east of the Mississippi. It's beautiful country, but at night it's an entirely different thing. The road climbs hard out of the valley and into the mountains, and the radio signal gets spotty fast. By the time I was 30 minutes out of Staunton, I had nothing but static. I left it on because the white noise was better than silence. Then, clearly, through the static, a voice. Not music. Not a station. A single voice, male, low and unhurried, speaking in full sentences. And it was saying, "You should stop before the bridge. You should stop before the bridge. You should stop before the bridge." Repeating. Over and over. Calm as a weather forecast. I turned the radio off. I turned it back on. Static. I kept driving. The road runs along a creek and crosses it several times on small bridges. I crossed 2 of them without incident. On the approach to the third, a narrow one-lane bridge over a wider stretch of the stream, my headlights swept across something on the road ahead. A tree. A large oak, recently fallen, across both lanes. Completely blocking the road. Fresh break, the wood was pale and bright where it had snapped, not weathered, not old. I stopped about 15 feet from it. If I hadn't already been going slow, if I'd been doing the 55 I'd been doing most of the drive, I would have hit it without warning. The bridge approach was on a downhill curve. You wouldn't have seen the tree until you were on top of it. I sat there for a long time. Engine running. Looking at that tree. Then I turned around and drove back to Staunton. I reported the tree to the county road service from a gas station payphone, one of the last ones still working in the area. I checked every radio station I could find when I got back to town. AM, FM, weather band. I described the voice to a friend who works in broadcast. He said no station he knew of ran that kind of content. No emergency service used civilian radio bands that way. I measured the distance on a map. Between where I'd heard the voice and where the tree was blocking the road, 9.4 miles. 9.4 miles of dark mountain highway, with no cell service, no other cars, and no way for any person or system I'm aware of to have known that tree had fallen, let alone to have broadcast a warning on a dead radio band to a specific driver on a specific road. I have no explanation. I have never stopped looking for one. And sometimes, on long drives through remote country, I leave the radio on even when there's no signal. Just the static. Just the white noise. Listening, without quite meaning to, for anything underneath it. Story 6. There were 4 of us. Me, my cousin Dree, and 2 of her friends from college, Jess and Paul. We were doing a camping weekend in the Monongahela. We'd been in before, always in summer. This was early spring, mud season, and we probably had no business being on Forest Road 144 after dark. We'd stayed too late at the campfire and didn't start the drive out until around 11. FR 144 is a gravel forest road, single lane in places, winding through thick second-growth hardwood. In the daylight it's fine. At night, even with good headlights, it feels like driving through a tunnel that keeps narrowing. About 20 minutes in, we saw eyes on the road. Big ones. Low to the ground, too far apart. We figured bear and waited. They didn't move. Paul got out to try to spook it. The eyes dropped below the beam of our headlights and vanished without sound. We moved on. 5 minutes later, eyes again. Same position in the road. Same height. Same spacing. We stopped. Waited again. They moved into the woods on the left side of the road, slowly, and disappeared. Another 5 minutes. Eyes. But this time they were to our right, in the woods, not on the road. Not blocking us. Parallel to us. Moving at about the same speed as the car. Dree turned around to look out the back window. Something was behind us too. Not eyes this time. Just movement. A shape in the dark at the edge of our taillight's reach, keeping pace with the car. Paul said, calmly, "Drive faster." I was already accelerating. The forest road runs about 8 miles before it connects to a paved county route. I drove those 8 miles faster than anyone should drive a gravel forest road in the dark, and the whole time there was something, or somethings, keeping pace with us in the trees on both sides. Not trying to stop us. Not charging the car. Just keeping pace. We hit the county road and I floored it. Paved road, streetlights in the distance, the whole world normal again. We didn't stop until we hit a gas station in Marlinton. None of us said anything for the first 10 minutes. Finally Jess asked if we thought we'd been hurted. Pushed along the road in a specific direction. We hadn't thought about it in those terms. But when we did, something clicked into place that made the whole thing worse. Whatever was in those woods hadn't been chasing us. It had been on both sides and behind us. The only direction that had been clear the entire time was forward. We'd been moved. I don't know what made the eyes. I don't know what was in those woods. I know there are bears in the Monongahela, and coyotes, and bobcats, and things less easily named. I know that none of those animals behave that way. Bears don't flank. Coyotes don't coordinate a pursuit on both sides of a moving vehicle while something else takes up the rear. There is no single animal in those woods that moves like that, with that kind of patience and geometry. Which means either it was multiple animals acting in an organized way that has no precedent in anything I've read about Appalachian wildlife. Or it was something else. And I have never been able to decide which of those possibilities frightens me more. We haven't been back. Story 7. I've looked this up. I've checked it compulsively. Mile marker 74 on US 60 in the New River Gorge area exists in one place. 1. I have a screenshot of the map. I have the coordinates. It exists once. I passed it 4 times. I was driving back to Charleston from a work trip in Lewisburg. US 60 is a 2-lane highway that threads through some of the most dramatic gorge country in the state. At night, with the river far below and the walls of the gorge on either side, it can feel like you're at the bottom of the world. I like that drive. I've always liked it. The first time I passed mile marker 74, I noticed it because one of the reflectors on the post was broken in a specific way. It had a diagonal crack across it, and one half had rotated sideways, catching the light at a wrong angle. It looked like a broken eye. Distinctive enough that I registered it. I kept driving. The road twisted through the gorge. I passed other markers, 75, 76, 77. Towns, bridges, the whole route. Then, mile marker 74. Same broken reflector. Same cracked, sideways rotated face. I pulled over. Sat there. Tried to work out what had happened. Had I taken a wrong turn somewhere? Gone in a loop? I checked my odometer. 15 miles since the first pass. You cannot travel 15 miles and return to the same mile marker on a non-looping highway unless you've doubled back, and I would have known. I had not stopped. I had not turned around. I had been on a 2-lane road with no exits between those points. I drove on. More markers. More road. The gorge opening up into wider country. Mile marker 74. Third time. I stopped the car in the middle of the lane, there was no shoulder, and just sat there with my hazards on for 2 full minutes. Staring at that broken reflector. The road was empty. Nothing behind me, nothing ahead, just the highway and the trees and the dark gorge dropping away on my left. I called my brother. He picked up, half asleep, told me I was tired and to pull over and sleep. I told him I couldn't explain what was happening. He said it was probably mislabeled markers, maintenance errors, duplicate numbers. I said maybe. I kept driving. Mile marker 74. 4th time. I turned around. Drove east, back toward Lewisburg, for an hour. Then took a different route home, a long way through Beckley and I-64. Added an hour and a half to my drive. When I got home I checked. I emailed the West Virginia Department of Highways and asked about any duplicate or mislabeled mile markers on US 60 between Lewisburg and the gorge. They responded 2 weeks later. No mislabeled markers on that stretch. No reported maintenance issues with reflectors at that time. I have that email saved. Mile marker 74 exists once, I passed it 4 times, I do not know what that means, I'm not sure I want to. Story 8. I don't usually notice other cars much when I'm driving. But on a dark mountain highway at night, any light is a reference point, and I'd been watching the headlights of a car behind me for about 10 minutes. Not close enough to worry about. Just there, a comfortable distance back, matching my speed through the curves. I was on NC 181 heading south out of Newland toward Morganton. It's a mountain road that drops off the Blue Ridge into the foothills. Tight switchbacks at the top, long open straights as you descend. At night you can see for a long way once the road straightens out. Somewhere on the descent, a straight stretch, the car behind me pulled closer. Not aggressive. Not like they were trying to pass. Just closing the gap. I could see their headlights more clearly now. Old car, probably. The lights were slightly yellow, not modern white. Then I noticed the car. From a distance, when your eyes are adjusted to the dark, the interior of an approaching car is visible in ways it isn't in daylight. Especially when the overhead road lighting is non-existent, which it was. There were 2 people in the car. Driver and passenger. I could see their silhouettes clearly. The driver's hands on the wheel. Normal. The passenger was facing backward. Not turned slightly. Not looking out the side window. Fully rotated in the seat, body twisted, face pointed directly at my car through their rear windshield. A passenger in the back seat of most cars can turn around. But this was the front seat. Whoever they were sitting in the front passenger seat, body turned completely around, facing rear. Watching me. I changed my speed. Slowed down considerably to let them pull further ahead. They slowed too. I sped up. They sped up. We stayed in that configuration, them just ahead of me, the passenger facing backward through the glass, for what felt like 4 or 5 minutes. Then I hit a long curve and their lights disappeared, and by the time I came out of the curve they were gone. No turnoffs. No driveways in that stretch. No visible taillights ahead on the straightaway that followed. Just gone. I pulled into the first gas station in Nebo and sat for a while. The attendant, older woman, reading a paperback, didn't look up when I came in for water. I thought about saying something. What would I have said? I drove the rest of the way home with every light in the car on, which doesn't actually help anything but made me feel marginally better. The image of that backward passenger stayed with me for weeks. It still comes back sometimes at night, when I'm driving somewhere unfamiliar and a car appears behind me and stays there just a little too comfortably, just a little too long. There's a specific horror in being watched from a moving vehicle on an empty road. No way to stop, no way to confront it, no way to confirm what you saw. You just have to keep driving and carry the image with you. A silhouette in a front seat, twisted fully around, face pressed toward the rear glass, watching the road fall away behind the car. Watching you follow. I don't know what it meant. I don't know if it meant anything at all. But I know that stretch of NC 181 on a wet night has a different character for me now than any other road I've driven. Something happened there that I didn't understand, and the not understanding is the part one can't set down. Story 9. I want to say up front that I have nothing against park rangers. Most of them are dedicated, professional, and frankly underpaid. This story isn't about a bad ranger. I'm not sure it's about a ranger at all. I was driving the Blue Ridge Parkway south in October. I do this drive every fall. It's one of the best leaf-peeping routes in the country and I like having it mostly to myself at night. Around milepost 349, near the Fancy Gap overlook, I saw a truck parked on the shoulder with its amber flashers on. Green and tan. Park service markings. Standard ranger vehicle. A figure in uniform was standing beside it, facing the tree line on the right. Not moving. Just standing there. I slowed down and rolled my window down. Asked if everything was okay, if there was an accident ahead. The ranger, I'll call him that, turned toward me. He was wearing the flat-brimmed hat, the jacket, full uniform. He looked at my car for a moment. Then he said, "You should be careful here. People stop on this road." I said I understood. Asked if there was something specific I should know about. He said, "Some of them don't want to be helped." I waited, thinking he'd continue. He didn't. He just looked at me with an expression that was either deeply tired or deeply afraid, and I couldn't tell which. I asked if he needed anything, if there was something I could do. He shook his head and turned back to face the tree line. Whatever he was watching for, he went back to watching for it. I drove on. Maybe 2 miles south, there was a small overlook parking area. I pulled in and opened my National Park Service app to see if there were any alerts or incidents listed for that section of the parkway. Nothing. Routine night. No incidents logged. I called the parkway's general information line the next morning. Described the location and the encounter. Asked if there had been a ranger on patrol at that area around that time. The woman on the phone put me on hold twice. When she came back, she said there had not been any ranger patrol assigned to that stretch of the parkway that night. Their southernmost patrol had been stationed 12 miles north. I described the truck. She said all parkway trucks were accounted for and logged. I asked about the uniform, the markings on the vehicle. She said she couldn't speak to that. There are counterfeit rangers. People who put fake markings on trucks and wear approximate uniforms. It happens, especially in remote areas. I know that. I've told myself that 100 times. But counterfeit rangers are usually running a scam, stopping cars, impersonating officers, taking money, or worse. This person hadn't stopped me. Hadn't flagged me down. Hadn't asked for anything. He'd just given me a warning. And he'd gone back to watching the tree line like something out there in the dark required watching. I keep coming back to what he said, and the specific way he said it. Some of them don't want to be helped. Not some of them are dangerous. Not some of them are in bad shape. Some of them don't want to be helped. As if help had been offered before on that stretch of road, and the offering had not gone well. I don't drive that part of the parkway at night anymore. And when I drive it in the day, I find myself scanning the shoulders, the overlooks, the tree lines, looking for people who are standing too still, facing the wrong direction, absorbed in something I have no context for. I haven't seen anything. But I also haven't stopped looking. Story 10. I'm not one for picking up hitchhikers. Never have been, and that night on TN 32 in the mountains of northeastern Tennessee, I almost didn't stop. The road was empty and wet. Rain had been falling for 3 hours. My windshield wipers were working hard and my visibility was maybe 100 feet. She was standing on the shoulder under the narrow overhang of a dead tree, holding nothing, wearing nothing waterproof. Completely soaked. She was young, maybe mid-20s, and the look on her face wasn't distress. It wasn't relief when I pulled over either. It was just a kind of exhausted resignation, like she'd been waiting a long time and was only mildly surprised that waiting had worked. I asked if she needed a ride. She got in the back seat without answering. I asked if she was okay. She said she was fine. She asked how far I was going. I told her I was heading to Oneida. She said that was fine. We drove in silence for a while. The rain got worse. The road curved up into the ridge and visibility dropped to almost nothing. I told her I was going to slow down. She didn't respond. I glanced in the rearview mirror. She was looking out the window, fingers pressed flat against the glass. After about 20 minutes she said, quietly and without any particular emotion, "Will you remember my name?" I said I would, though I hadn't gotten it. I asked what it was. She told me. A simple name. Common enough. I repeated it back to her. She nodded. I asked if she had family in Oneida, someone I could call. She said she didn't know. I asked if she wanted me to stop somewhere, get her something warm to eat. She said no. When we got to the edge of Oneida, I pulled up to a gas station that was still lit and turned around to ask where specifically she wanted to go. The back seat was empty. No door had opened. No sound of movement. The child locks weren't on. I'd have heard the door. I'd been watching the road, not the mirror, for the last few minutes. I cannot account for how she left the car. I sat in the gas station parking lot for 20 minutes. I went inside and asked the attendant, a young guy half asleep behind the counter, if he'd seen a woman walk past in the last few minutes. Wet clothes. Young. He shook his head. I drove the streets around the station for a while, looking. Nothing. I still remember her name. I'm not going to say it here. I don't know why, but it feels wrong to say it to an audience. It feels like it belongs only to whatever that encounter was. Saying it out loud, in public, to people who don't know her. It feels like a kind of betrayal. She asked me to remember it. So I do. Just not here. Story 11. I drove through a small town on US 11 in Virginia's Shenandoah Valley that I cannot find on any map I've checked since. I know how that sounds. I know. But hear me out. It was March. I was exhausted, coming off a 12-hour drive from New England, heading south to a job interview the next morning. I had about 3 hours left. I was staying on US 11 intentionally. I hate interstates late at night, the hypnotic sameness of them. US 11 at least has towns, buildings, things to look at. The Valley Corridor, with the Massanutten Ridge on one side and the Blue Ridge on the other, is beautiful even in the dark. Farmland. Old stone walls. Silos catching the moonlight. Around 3:15 I passed through what looked like a small community. Main Street, maybe 4 or 5 blocks of it. Old brick commercial buildings, the kind you see in towns that were built before cars and never quite modernized. A diner that appeared open, lights on, neon sign lit in the window. A hardware store. A barbershop with a striped pole still turning. A small park with a white wooden bandstand in the center. And people. Dozens of people, on the sidewalks, in the street, standing in groups on corners, moving in and out of the diner. At 3:15 in the morning on a Tuesday in March in a small Virginia mountain town, dozens of people were just out. Living their day as if it were noon. I slowed down to a crawl to look. The scene was completely normal on the surface. People in ordinary clothes talking, laughing quietly, walking dogs. A couple sitting on a bench in the park. A man sweeping the sidewalk in front of the hardware store. A few cars parked along the main street, nothing newer than the 1980s from what I could see. Nobody looked at my car. Not one person. I drove the whole length of the main street, 4 blocks, maybe 5, and not a single face turned toward me. Not one set of eyes drifted to my headlights. It was as if I was invisible. As if my car made no sound, cast no light, existed in a different layer of the world than they did. That was the detail that finally broke through my exhaustion and made my skin prickle. In any normal town, at any hour, a slow-moving car draws glances. People look. It's instinct. Not one of those dozens of people looked. I pulled over on the far edge of town, got out of the car, and stood there in the cold March air looking back down the main street. The town was still active. Still lit. Still populated. The distant sound of a conversation drifting on the wind. The faint bell above the diner door as someone went in. I took a photo on my phone. I remember doing this clearly. I remember steadying myself against the car door and framing the shot. I remember looking at the screen and seeing the image there, blurry because my hands weren't steady, but the shapes of the buildings and the warm light spilling from the diner windows were visible. I got back in the car and drove on. Something about standing there alone on the edge of that town in the dark, with all those people inside it who couldn't see me, felt profoundly wrong. Like standing outside a window looking into a lit room where no one knows you're there. I wanted distance between myself and it. When I got to my destination and looked for the photo, it wasn't there. Not deleted. My camera roll showed no photos from a 2-hour window around that time. No record that I'd opened the camera app at all. I've driven US 11 through that valley 3 times since. I've looked up every incorporated and unincorporated community along the full stretch between Strasburg and Woodstock. I've checked historical records, old county maps, Google Street View mile by mile, satellite imagery. I cannot find a main street with those buildings in that location. I cannot find a diner, a barbershop with a turning pole, a bandstand in a park, anywhere along that corridor that matches what I saw. The most unsettling thing isn't the town itself. The most unsettling thing is how completely normal it looked. How unhurried. A community fully alive at 3 a.m., going about its business with total indifference to the dark surrounding it, to the empty valley road, to the lone car passing through. As if it existed on a different schedule than the rest of the world. As if time there ran on terms it had set for itself, long ago, and had no interest in explaining to anyone passing through. Story 12. The Tail of the Dragon is 11 miles and 318 curves. In the daylight, with motorcyclists and sports car drivers who've come from 3 states away to run it, it's an experience. At 2 a.m. in November, alone, it is something else entirely. I'd driven it twice before, both times in daylight. Taking it at night was a decision I made badly, on the back end of a long drive from Gatlinburg, slightly more tired than I should have been. But it was the most direct route and I told myself it was fine. The curves are so constant that you stop thinking about them. You just flow, left, right, the trees a wall on both sides, the road narrow and perfect. Your headlights don't project far. You're reacting more than planning. About 4 miles in, my car's Bluetooth disconnected and the speakers cycled into some kind of default mode I'd never encountered. A low hiss. Not static, exactly. More like the sound of a room with lots of people in it, far away, just below intelligibility. I reached to turn it off. The hiss got louder. Then quiet. Then a voice, through my car's speakers, said my name. Not a generic name. Mine. My actual first and last name. Clearly. Calmly. I jerked the wheel and almost put the car into the tree line on the right. Got control. Pulled into a turnout about 100 yards ahead. Sat there, engine running, hands shaking on the wheel. I pressed every button on the dashboard. Turned the audio system completely off. Sat in silence. I drove the remaining 7 miles to the Tennessee side in absolute silence, both hands on the wheel, not touching anything. I took every curve at 20 miles an hour. I didn't care how long it took. I didn't care about anything except getting off that road. When I reached US 129 on the Tennessee side, I pulled into the parking lot of the Crossroads of Time store, closed at that hour, and sat for 30 minutes. I've thought about this constantly since. Bluetooth glitch. Atmospheric interference picking up a broadcast. A piece of audio I'd stored on my phone cycling through at random. I've tried every rational door. Most of them I can get open a crack. None of them open all the way. Because here's the thing. My last name is uncommon. It is not a name you'd encounter by accident in a random broadcast. And the voice knew to put them together. First name, last name, spoken as a unit, the way someone would say it if they were looking at it written down in front of them. Or the way someone would say it if they already knew you. If they'd known you for a while. If they'd been following your route through those mountains for longer than you realized, waiting for the right place to let you know. 318 curves. Walls of old-growth forest. No cell service. No way out but forward. It chose that road. It chose that moment. And whatever it was, it knew exactly who was in the car. I got home safe. I always do. But I sleep with a light on now. And some nights, when the house is quiet and the dark outside is deep, I think about that voice. Its patience. Its precision. And I wonder how long it had been waiting to say my name.